Welcome to my garden, the GinGeeGoodEarth program. I welcome you today. We're on production number 6, part 8. We're going to continue with the reading A Universal History of the United States of America, June 19th, 2020. And we're going to do a special reading from the book of The Wit and Wisdom of John F. Kennedy. And we're going to read the chapter 2 on freedom. We're going to review some delectable canopy cheese mixtures, dip and eat. Remember, I'm a clinical dietitian, so I'm always thinking about what's out there good to eat. And that recipe is from the Stouffer's restaurant, so that should be fun. And first we're going to read a compendium of Charles Cullington reading on the cultural heritage of the Western Pennsylvania pioneers. So I welcome you today. Enjoy the picture show. And a lot of the pictures are from different museums and Pennsylvania parks and downtown New York City. So enjoy the picture show. And let's, without further ado, begin on the cultural heritage of Western Pennsylvania pioneers, dated 209. The seeds of civilization that were planted in Western Pennsylvania were derived from plants that had matured in Europe, especially in the British Isles in Germany and in English colonies in America in the second half of the 18th century. The civilized world of the day, at least in the minds of Western Europeans, consisted of they had the right to exploit it to promote their own advancement in the only part of the world that really mattered, Western Europe. Yet their civilization at the middle of the century was not much of an improvement on that of medieval times. Despite the Renaissance, the inventions of printing, gunpowder, and improved nautical instruments, and the tremendous expansion of the known world, the life of the common man was not very different from what it had been in the Egypt of the pharaohs. In 1750, the old feudal aristocracy still dominated Western Europe. Aristocracy. Sorry about that. And the world was envisioned as made up of the rulers, the clerics, and the workers. Europe was overwhelmingly agricultural. Tools and implements were crude, and goods were manufactured by hand. Considering the cost of handicraft products, there was a surprising amount of commerce, but transportation was still carried on by cart, pack horse, sailboat, and roads were worse than they had been in 1,500 years before. So I wanted to repeat a sentence. The civilized world of the day, at least in the minds of Western Europeans, consisted of Western Europe. The rest of the globe was merely heathendom, and Christian nations felt that they had the right to exploit it to promote their own advancement in the only part of the world that really mattered, Western Europe. The religious wars that followed the Reformation had long been over, but the animosities implanted by them still burned intensely. The universal church had been succeeded by established churches varying from state to state and each intolerant of dissent. Radical religious sects attempting to set rigid moral and theological standards flourished, especially among the common people, but also did vice, crime, and immorality. Diabolism. Former education was controlled by the churches, and only few could read or write. Charitable institutions were increasing, usually as auxiliaries of religious denominations, but they made little impression on the mass of human misery. Honesty and industry were of course held up as the paths to financial success and worldly respect at the same time. However, the honest and industrious citizens was given to understand that misery was the inevitable lot of the lower order. Okay, we'll finish that reading. We'll begin that at the next reading. Now I'd like to read The Wit and Wisdom of John F. Kennedy, compiled by Hallmark. And we're on Chapter 2, Freedom. We read Chapter 1, Peace, yesterday. I have to get my flashlight. Okay, bear with me. Chapter 2 on Freedom. Ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. January 20th, 1961. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum freedom, in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world. January 20th, 1961. It is the fate of this generation to live with a struggle we cannot start, that we did not start. In this fate of this generation, to live with a struggle we did not start, in a world we did not make. But the pressures of life are not always distributed by choice. And while no nation has ever faced such a challenge, no nation has ever been so ready to seize the burden and the glory of freedom. January 11th, 1962. And today's date, again, of the month of June, we have to remember that we're in a pandemic of COVID-19. And this in itself is a terrific challenge for all of mankind all over the world. It has affected 188 nations. Let me go back to the book, The Wit and Wisdom of John F. Kennedy. It's vital business, the running of a democracy, and it's important that all of us register and vote for the party of our choice. I am supporting the party of my choice, and I intend to vote in November elections, August 28th, 1962. One of my very first videos is a happy birthday video that encourages voting. And again, I put the lyrics to a song for President Donald J. Trump. And you can look at that video in the very beginning. We in this country, in this generation, are by the destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and our responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men, to have been delivered November 22nd, 1963. I have found that people everywhere, in spite of occasional disappointments, look to us, not to our wealth or power, but to the splendor of our ideals. For our nation is commissioned by history to be either an observer of freedom's failure or the cause of its success. Our overriding obligation in the months ahead is to fulfill the world's hopes by fulfilling our own faith. January 11th, 1962. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved. October 22nd, 1962. I believe in human dignity as the source of national purpose. I believe in human dignity as the source of national purpose, in human liberty as the source of national action, the human heart as the source of national compassion, and in the human mind as the source of our invention and our ideas. Together, let us build sturdy mansions of freedom, mansions that all the world can admire and copy, but that no tyrant can ever enter. July 1st, 1963. The wave of the future is not the conquest of the world by a single dogmatic creed, but the liberation of the diverse energies of free nations and free men. March 23rd, 1962. We are Americans. That is a proud boast. That is a great privilege to be a citizen of the United States, and we must meet our responsibilities. We stand for freedom. That is our conviction for ourselves. That is our only commitment to others. No friend, no neutral, and no adversary should think otherwise. We are not against any man or any nation or any system except as it is hostile to freedom. Our historic task in this embattled age is not merely to defend freedom, it is to extend its writ and strengthen its covenant. Tomorrow I'll read On the Arts, Chapter 3. So now let's get back to the book on the universal history of the United States of America, dated 1450 through 1830, and we're on Chapter 3. Thank goodness, it's taken a while. The Universal History of the United States, Part 2, Chapter 4. Well, I guess it's Chapter 4. We just finished Chapter 3. Discovery and Progress of the Middle and Southern States, New York. The reader's first attention in the second part will be directed to the settlement of New York. Captain Henry Hudson, the Hudson River is named after him, commissioned by the king in 1608, sailed in the employment of several London merchants to North America. He came upon the coast in about 40 degrees of north latitude and made a discovery of Long Island and Hudson River. He proceeded up the Hudson River as far as the latitude of 43 and called it by his own name. About 2 years after, he made second voyage to the river in the service of a number of Dutch merchants, and sometime after sold his right to them. The right to the country, however, belonged to King James, by virtue of the discovery which Hudson had made under his commission. The English protested against the sale, but the Dutch in 1614 built a fort nearly on the same ground where Albany now stands, which is inland from the Atlantic Ocean, which they called Fort Otrania. Sir Thomas Dale, governor of Virginia, directly after dispatched Captain Argall to dispossess the Dutch, and they submitted to the King of England under the governor of Virginia. But receiving the reinforcement the next year, they again asserted the right of Holland to the country, and erected Fort Amsterdam on the south of the island. The English for many years did not interfere. In 1621, an extensive territory on both sides of the Hudson was granted to the Dutch West India Company and called New Netherlands. The boundaries were considered by the company as including the Connecticut River on the north and the Delaware River on the south. In 1623, they erected a fort on the Delaware, which they called Nassau's, and in 633 they erected another Connecticut, which they called Good Hope. Near the former, the Swedes had a settlement, and a quarrel arose between the settlers, which continued for many years, which terminated in the subjugation of the Swedes. New Jersey. The first settlement of New Jersey was made by the Danes about the year 1624. Soon afterwards, several Dutch families seated themselves in the vicinity of New York. In 1626, a company was formed in Sweden under the patronage of King Gustavus Adolphus for the purpose of planning a colony in America. The next year, a number of Swedes and Finns came over and made the settlement on the west bank of the Delaware River. In 1640, the English began a plantation on the eastern bank. The Swedes, in concert with the Dutch, who possessed New York, drove them out of the country. Delaware. This state was settled by the company of Swedes and Finns under the patronage of King Gustavus Adolphus. In 1627, they landed at Cape Henlopen and were so charmed with its appearance that they gave it the name of Paradise Point. The country they called New Sweden in the river Delaware, New Swedenland stream, they purchased of the Indians the lands on both sides of that river from the sea to the falls, and seated themselves at the mouth of the Christian Creek near Wilmington. Being frequently molested by the Dutch who claimed the right to the country, they for their protection built forts at Christian Levinston and Tinicum. The last was their seat of government, and John Pritz, the governor, erected an elegant mansion at the place, which he named Prince Hall. Maryland. This state was settled by one Colvert who sailed for America near the close of 1633, accompanied by about 200 immigrants, chiefly Roman Catholics. They arrived in February of 1634 at the mouth of the river Potomac. At the conference with the Indians who dwelt on the shore, they purchased Yoamaco, a considerable village, the site of which St. Mary's now occupies. This colony, as well as the others, in the early period of their existence, was afflicted with troubles. They were principally caused by one William Claiborne. While a member of the Virginia Council, he had obtained a license from the king to traffic in those parts of America where no other person enjoyed the exclusive right of trade. Under the license, he had made a small settlement on the island